Support for NPR and the following message come from Indeed. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed's sponsored jobs. Claim a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/NPR. Terms and conditions apply.
You ever have like somebody over the crib and like they're looking at your bookshelves and you're like, oh no, what are they? Oh brother, oh no.
I've been on those dates. I was like, wait, Decision Points? And that's the only book here? I have to get out.
I think for me back in the day, it was Tucker Max. If I saw any type of Tucker Max book, it was like, I'm lacing up, I'm sprinting. Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. On October 31st, as 40 million Americans waited to hear about the status of their SNAP benefits, President Trump threw a Great Gatsby-themed Halloween party. According to the White House, the party was labeled, "A little party never killed nobody." And while some may see the irony in invoking the Great Gatsby, it made me wonder, how have modern interpretations of literary fiction shaped the way we dissect real-life issues? And how can the fictional accounts of these characters teach us about the world around us? We're getting into it with Andrew Limbog, host of NPR's Book of the Day podcast.
Hey, what's up?
And Princess Weeks, writer and cultural critic.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my God, happy to have y'all. Okay, so I wonder, what did you think when you saw President Trump's Great Gatsby-themed party? And why do you think people had such strong reactions to the theme of the party?
It's one thing to celebrate like one of the great American novels. It's one thing to celebrate like robber baron excess while people are wondering about their SNAP benefits.
Good point. Fair point.
If I'm being honest, my first reaction was like to defend the idea of a Gatsby party. We all know what The Great Gatsby is about. In case listeners don't know, it's not a glorification of excess, but it's about how these like rich people are all fake and frauds. And yet, it is very popular for people who love the book to celebrate by throwing a Gatsby party. I did a piece in the summer about celebrating anniversary of The Great Gatsby, and I was trying to ask a couple people, be like, isn't that weird? Isn't that like not hypocritical, but just like missing the point? What they were telling me was like, I don't know, it's fun to get dressed up and drink beers, you know, right? And I was like, you know what? It is fun to get dressed up and drink champagne. And so the politics and the optics of it is one thing, but yeah, that was my first reaction, was to be like, maybe it's okay for people to have Gatsby parties. I would argue that President Donald Trump, he does have a slightly different stature in society. But I mean, I'm not going to knock a Great Gatsby themed party, you know, for myself and the other hoi polloi. I think that would be a good time. To give some background, though, for those who don't know, even though, yes, as Andrew pointed out, this year is a big year for The Great Gatsby. It's 100th anniversary of publishing. But some of you may not have read it or aren't familiar, need a refresher on the story. The Great Gatsby was written by F. Scott Fitzgerald and published in 1925. It follows World War I veteran Nick Carraway as he is swept away into the raging 20s lifestyle of his Long Island neighbor, Jay Gatsby. Gatsby is mysterious, rich, and throws grand parties at his Long Island estate. And as the story progresses, Gatsby's past comes to haunt him. And I just want to know, even though at the party, supposedly folks were saying, you know, a little party never killed nobody, in The Great Gatsby, spoiler alert, a little party actually did kill him. So yeah, that's actually a big deal. That's a big one.
Yeah, exactly.
I was kind of like,
That's how you know he didn't read the book. Like
no Cliff's Notes, no Spark Notes. You didn't skip to the last chapter and just try to see how things wrapped up. This whole kind of missing the point, as you said, Andrew, or this kind of not really getting the intended lessons from the book. It's not just something that's happened in this case with this Great Gatsby themed party. I wonder, what are some popular or classic books that you've seen consistently misinterpreted, or that you're seeing currently misinterpreted a lot in modern discourse?
I think the one book I see a lot, at least in popular discourse, is people thinking that Nabokov's Lolita is like a pro-pedophilia book. I think the book's packaging and the way the book is presented, including the covers, does the book a disservice. It's about a man falling in love with a young girl. And it's obviously about how bad that is and how much of a weirdo psycho that this dude is. But it is often interpreted as a stamp of approval of pedophilia.
Yeah, I don't think it's still very popular, but I would say Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Uncle Tom's Cabin is so divorced from the time period it was written in. Like, it was intended to be like a anti-slavery text. And so it was very much meant to highlight the souls and the Christian values and why that we should be against slavery. Unfortunately, white people did love it, and they thought this would make a great minstrel show.
Oh,
As a result, the term Uncle Tom and a lot of the values in that book are just so heavily dated and also written for like white readers and not for Black people that it is very hard to like get through at times. And I think because the term Uncle Tom has been taken as like a Black person who like loves white people, like that's become the idea of who that character is when that is not the case.
that is so interesting. I mean, on the other side of the literary spectrum, there are, people who have, seem to really have deeply read and appreciate certain books, but perhaps got a lesson out of it that many other readers didn't get. I'm thinking about like J.D. Vance, for example. He cited Lord of the Rings as fundamental to his journey to conservatism, which is not like always the meaning that many people are gleaning from that book. But what does it say about these works that they can be so vastly interpreted that people can glean completely different meanings from very closely reading the same text?
Yeah, I think specifically with Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien's faith was very important to him. And a lot of the underpinning of Christianity is like mixed into it. If you read his letters, he talks about how his concepts of God play into the creation stuff of like the Silmarillion. So like I can understand you gleaming something about Christianity from the text. Is not even just a faith, but it's also like the ideas of the faith are about giving to people, giving back to the land, charity, community, suffering, all these other kind of things. So I think in a lot of ways that kind of idea of aesthetic comes back of like, is he seeing in this text like a white Christian narrative that reiterates Christian nationalism to him through the fact that this is like a journey that is religious in nature?
I honestly think that's what makes literature beautiful in a way, right? If everyone reads a book and 100% of its audience goes away thinking that was about X, I think that's a signal that that was just propaganda, that was like a political text, that was, something with a job to do, and it did it well. Whereas I think the beautiful thing about literature is that we can read the same book and come away with completely different interpretations of it, assuming a good faith in reading, and talk and discuss and fight about it. That's what an English degree is for. You know what I mean?
That's why I got it. Like, it's really just to argue.
Exactly.
Princess, something that you mentioned about like reading into a book and kind of seeing a very specific maybe idea or slice of whiteness where maybe that isn't perhaps the intent or even necessarily what's on the page, makes me think about Wuthering Heights. There's a new like film adaptation that's coming out soon, directed by Emerald Fennell.
Oh, this is the one with Elordi's in it. Jacob Elordi's in it, right?
Yes, playing Heathcliff. And Heathcliff is a character that I think definitely has been misread. Talk to me about sort of like that misreading and how the reader's interpretation can sometimes maybe even reject or ignore what's on the page.
So one of the things that I think is like kind of important is that like when the European Western canon will mention that a character is dark, usually what they mean is that they have dark hair and dark eyes. They at most, usually they mean like maybe they're like Mediterranean, sometimes they're French, sometimes they're Italian. So like in general, a character can be described as having dark features. That just means they have dark hair and dark eyes. What makes Heathcliff stand out in Wuthering Heights is that they racialize his darkness very clearly. He's always described as like being the slur for Romani people. There's a passage where they bring up like, oh, you could pass for a Indian sailor. The fact that he is discovered in the major slave port is also of importance because, like, even though Wuthering Heights was written after slavery was abolished in England, it takes place before that. So there is a lot of subtext that Heathcliff is mixed race. And there is a lot of frustration about the fact that Jacob Elordi is playing Heathcliff because in a modern adaptation of Wuthering Heights, especially since we have had ones fairly recently where they did make Heathcliff a mixed race Black man, what are we doing by still maintaining a white aesthetic when it comes to a text that so explicitly is talking about race and class and the traumas of those things?
Coming up,
it is meaningful that multiple people across spectrums can read a text and enjoy it and get other things out of it. But I think it's important to also know what you're reading.
More with Princess and Andrew after the break.
This message comes from Dignity Memorial and Memphis Funeral Home, one of their nationwide providers. Retired football coach Bill Muir shares how they carefully designed a celebration of life that captured the essence of his wife, Barbara.
One of the things I so appreciated was the time and the effort he took into getting the details just right. And most importantly, we knew that Barbara would have loved it.
Find a provider near you, like Memphis Funeral Home, at dignitymemorial.com. Support for NPR and the following message come from Hydro. Don't let the holidays derail your fitness. Stay on track with Hydro. 20 minutes rowing on a Hydro targets 86% of your muscles as Olympians guide you from incredible locations worldwide. GQ named the Hydro Arc the best rower of 2025. And every Hydro comes with free shipping, a 30-day trial, and warranty. Go to hydro.com, code NPR, save up to $600 on your next rower. Hydro.com, code NPR.
This message comes from Wise, the app for using money around the globe. When you manage your money with Wise, you'll always get the mid-market exchange rate with no hidden fees. Join millions of customers and visit wise.com. T's and C's apply. This message comes from NPR sponsor eBay, who is home to millions of parts for your next project and free returns. If it doesn't fit or it isn't what you expected, eBay has your back. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay. Things people love.
It's interesting. While many people lament, I see this happen all the time on social media. They're like, oh, we weren't taught media literacy and skills in school. Books, like The Great Gatsby, are usually taught in American high schools. Like a lot of these books, they're on your summer reading lists. They're in the curricula. They're meant to help us to learn how to interpret not just works of literature, but the world around us. I wonder, why do you think some people may not see reading books as a type of media literacy? I mean, I don't know. It's almost like, why do we not see actual literacy as a part of media literacy? Yeah.
I think that's a branding issue on a part of the academics, right? On a part of the humanities. At least in my college experience, it was the humanities, and then the comms department was literally, the media department was literally in a different building. And I think it is changing now. From as a part of that Gatsby piece I did, I talked to an AP English teacher, and they were incorporating everything into the literature curriculum, right? I think they're trying to sort of course correct and right that branding error.
And I think also, at least in my experience, when I was in grad school, that was the time where I was really 100% reading in an analytical ways, reading for theory, reading for that kind of media literacy. And so while yes, you're learn themes and symbolism and those kind of things in gen ed English classes, it's not the same thing as actually going into deeper literary theory, learning about signs and signifiers, learning Lacan, learning all that kind of stuff, because that gives you a deeper understanding besides basic symbolism. Because a lot of European books that are in the Western canon that get elevated are, to the point that we're talking about with J.D. Vance, very Christian, very white centered. And so like when you're teaching that, especially I think to a lot of like brown kids, they don't inherently see the value in why do I need to, if I, like me growing up in Brooklyn, why do I need to read about Dickens? Why do I have to read Dickens? And I think a lot of educators don't get the time to really sit with a text and situate it. Like if you had a thing where like all you're doing is like going into like the London of Dickens, the poverty that he was trying to expose, the reasons why he focused it so much on the underclass, then you can have like a full education about why those texts still matter.
That's a really good point.
I try to approach people, I even like kind of like hesitate to call it like a misreading something, with some amount of grace, and being like, you know, because like not everybody is going to read like, you know, if a publisher is like reproducing or reprinting like a classic book, there's always like a 20-page foreword explaining all the historical context. Not everybody's gonna read that. I barely touch that stuff unless I'm reading it for work. You know what I mean? And so when people don't fully get the context, don't fully get like everything that's going on historically, and they come away thinking but like one thing about a book, and it's like I can't be too mad at it, right? It's like did you enjoy the pleasure of reading the book? Yeah, all right then. God bless, you know.
And sometimes reading can lead to more reading. I still very often will read something and be like, I'm not feeling it. And then have, you know, something else happen that may even feel unrelated that kind of unlocks something for me, and that thing that I didn't initially get. It, like I said, even as a professionally close reader, it still happens to me all the time. So if someone's reading something for pleasure and they're kind of like not getting every single point, it's not necessarily a big shock. It's very human. You know, Princess, as a content creator online, you often talk about BookTok, #BookTok, and the way some readers seem to want to forego the political or social implications within their favorite novels. I wonder, what's the disconnect there?
I think that BookTok is very egalitarian in its nature. And so it's like a massive book club that is like a mix of people who are, some of them love reading, have loved reading forever. And a big chunk of them are people who just started reading like during the pandemic.
Just started reading as a hobby?
Yeah, during the pandemic. And so they're very into like the aesthetics of it, the having the sprayed edges, having the fancy collector's things. So a lot of BookTok is not necessarily about reading, but the capitalism of owning books. And I think when you're dealing with that as a marketing tool to like build a platform, build interaction, you're not necessarily focusing on deep reading if you have to read like 150 books a year to churn out content. You know, like even as someone who does read quickly and does use a lot of sources in their works, like I take breaks because my brain will hurt. And I also don't do it about everything that I like, because I like to keep certain things like it's for me to read. It's my pleasure reading. So a lot of BookTok isn't necessarily about like sharing a love of books simply for love of the game. It is brand building. It is marketing for certain publishers and certain titles. And because of that, the desire is to be very positive all the time and not be super critical, because to be super critical means that you're not going to get those brand deals. You're not going to get those arcs. You're not going to be one of those resources, and you don't get the same kind of audience. There's a big group of people on BookTok that want to read for fun, to escape, to turn their brains off, and that is their right. I just think that if you are reading The Hunger Games and you get out of it not having like really thought about capitalism at all, or like the concept of like, you know, what's it like living and growing up in an open air prison, TM, then did you even read The Hunger Games? It's a universal problem of like, a lot of people read. Not everyone is reading to learn something, to grow. They're reading to like shut their brains off. And that means that like, even if a work is political, they are just seeing the general, like the curtains are blue of it, and not like, why is blue the color that they would use to express this emotion?
I wonder, to both of you, what's the danger of avoiding the implied themes, or even like what the author sometimes says is the stated intent, or has said is the stated intent of a piece of literature?
You just can't have an honest conversation. it is meaningful that multiple people across spectrums can read a text and enjoy it and get other things out of it. But I think it's important to like also know what you're reading. In literary theory, there are people who believe in reading the text just for itself. And whatever is on the page is on the page, and that's all you're supposed to get out of it. And then there are those that are like, take into consideration like who the author is, when were they writing it, all those kind of things. And I think that those two kinds of readerships will always kind of be clashing with each other. Because like it's more work to do the other thing, and that work can lead to discomfort. And I think the inability to be uncomfortable with the art that you like, it has been a very big issue with like our millennial generation of like feeling like it has to mean that you are this or that. Even if we do disagree with an author in a text, I think there is an importance of actually reading it and knowing what you're talking about.
Andrew, Princess, I have learned so much here. Thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
That was NPR's Andrew Limbaugh and writer and cultural critic Princess Weeks. So you all know I love hearing from you. And over the past few weeks, some of you have left the sweetest notes for me in the comments and reviews. One of y'all wrote, "This podcast makes me smile, think, and feel grateful for all who make it possible." Me too. Another wrote, "This is my favorite podcast produced by NPR." Me too. Another wrote, "Thanks for enriching my life." You guys, I'm blushing. And if any of those comments resonate with you, I would love, love, love it if you rated and reviewed this show wherever you're listening. It helps other people find the show, and that means this community we're building will get even bigger. So join the team. Rate and review this show right now. And thank you. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Alexis Williams.
This episode was edited by
Nina Patak.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Schwab. At Schwab, how you invest is your choice, not theirs. That's why when it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices. You can invest and trade on your own. Plus, get advice and more comprehensive wealth solutions to help meet your unique needs. With award-winning service, low costs, and transparent advice, you can manage your wealth your way at Schwab. Visit schwab.com to learn more.
Support for NPR comes from Donors Choose. In a time full of uncertainty, one thing is clear. Students are ready to learn, to dream, to grow. But they need fully stocked classrooms to thrive. Every pencil, book, and paintbrush funded through Donors Choose helps unlock creativity, confidence, and a brighter future. Learn how to donate at donorschoose.org/backtoschool. Support for this podcast and the following message come from the University at Buffalo, where researchers have developed an AI-powered handwriting analysis tool to screen for dyslexia and other learning disorders. More at buffalo.edu/NPR.